That's right.
My great uncle was a guard there.
Yeah. They don't make enough.
During the riot,
Oh.
he was so well liked, he looked at him and said, "Yep." Pick up a pipe and walk out. They ain't gonna bother you.
Left him alone. Yeah. I don't know how this is going to go this morning. It all started last night. The Hogs showed up and played the Vols, and it wasn't over until 10:30. Tanya was snoozing away, and I was wired to the game, and so 10:30-ish, turned the TV off, rolled over, started snoring, so she couldn't sleep anymore. But at 5 a.m., the cat decided that it was time for me to be up. And with a set of claws to the back of my skull, awakened me and said, "I want to eat." So you can't hear me? Can you hear me now? All right. Is that better? Pot me up a little bit, I guess, Kenny, till it starts squealing at us. So the cat woke me up at 5 a.m. So not enough sleep. And I often will get up early on Sunday morning and work with slides and read some more stuff just to get my head moving and get it in the right orientation. And I did that. To not wake Tanya up, because I'd kept her up half the night, I unplugged the laptop, took it downstairs, and sat in the living room and finished tweaking slides, and actually did quite a lot of slide tweaking. And then I went upstairs because I heard her get up, and so we were chatting, and I read some morning headlines. And when I went back downstairs to dump my slides over onto the thumb drive to bring them, the computer battery had gone dead. So I thought, oh, okay, no sweat. So I pick it up, go back upstairs, plug it in. I hadn't saved any of the changes. So at 10 minutes till 9, I was trying to recreate as many of the changes as I could think of, and produced what you're going to see, which could be interesting. So then, a little bit frazzled, but had a few minutes to kind of collect myself, made myself some more tea. We got in the car, drive over here, I let Tanya out at the door, park in the normal parking place, open the back door to get my Bible, my notes, and the thumb drive out of the car, and they're not there. They're still sitting in the living room at the house. So I don't think Tanya knows I left. I zoomed back to the house and walked in the door at 27 after. So it's been one of those mornings, I guess is what I'm saying, and what I'll remember and what I won't remember is going to be interesting. So this is truly going to be how is Rob moved by the Spirit to speak this morning, because here we are. So we left off last week. We had kind of finished up the 10 Commandments of James. And I want us to start back on this slide again. And this is the slide we ended on. And actually, I called this last week 9 do's and a don't. And so the do's are submit, resist, draw near, cleanse, purify, be sad, be wretched. It's a harsh translation, but realize who you are. Be wretched, mourn, weep, humble yourself. And I want us to start there with this idea of submission and recognition of who and what we are, especially in relation to God. And would suggest to you that if we are, man, this sounds loud. Are you sure, Betty? Is it good? Okay. All right. So maybe I'll just turn these down a notch. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So, electronics, wonderful things. So, if we will recognize where we fit in the creation, and this is kind of where we left off at the end last time, if we'll recognize where we fit in the creation, then the humility part won't be a problem. I remember, I thought it was Justin's reference to bumper stickers. I remember in Norman in the 80s, this was at the end of the Switzer era, there was this bumper sticker that said, "It's hard to be humble when you're a Sooner." It got a lot easier. We went through the Blake and Snellenberger, and we went through that period where it was real easy to suddenly be humble. We may find out next Saturday that we're there again. My sister called and said, "Hey, got tickets to the game, you want to go?" And I said, "Not really." So we're about to find out. If we will recognize where it is we fit into the creation, then this humbling ourselves problem will go away, because we're not particularly humble. And our culture teaches us not to be humble. Our culture teaches us that we are the center of the universe. Not we, each of us individually is the center of the universe. And in fact, you can get far enough wigged out that we create our own reality, and that all of you people just exist as a figment of my imagination, really. And so you can get as whacked out as you want to get on this idea that we are the center of things. And I mentioned to you last week, all you have to do is stand on that boat in the middle of the ocean and look at the moon on a moonlit night and recognize it's a big place and we are very small. And so I think part of humble yourselves before the Lord is exactly that. Realize how small and insignificant you really are. And yet, Jesus died for us. So no matter how small and insignificant, God gave of himself, his Son, to reconcile us. I am wretched. I should be mourning what I truly am. And that should drive me to that humility before the Lord. And if we're humble before the Lord, we're probably more likely to be humble with one another. And Justin, it's like, things happen for a reason. Justin's lesson this morning, every time he would introduce an additional thought, I would think, okay, there's my class. I can just quit. If we're humbling ourselves before the Lord, we're going to be humble toward one another, because we're going to recognize each of us as what and who we are. A creation of God. A creation of God designed to be a child of God and designed to be an ambassador. Just a fantastic fit today. If you will humble yourself, he will exalt you. There are blessings that come here for being a child of God. If you will sacrifice that which is internal to your will and bring it into subjection, submit yourselves to God. If you'll do those things, there are blessings that come. One of the things that we have struggled with in our household is just getting the kids to understand that if you follow the rules, good things happen. And if you don't, bad things happen. It's scriptural. It's a promise. You reap what you sow. And you can have a deep and abiding trust in that. And those of us who've been through some of that reaping understand. Good decisions, good consequences, bad decisions, bad consequences. And pick your list of what your bad decisions were. I mean, are they relationships? Are they financial problems? Are they illnesses? We select a lot of bad stuff. And it should not shock us that when we do that, we get bad results. But if that promise is true, and we've experienced that side of it for sure, but if that promise is true, then we can rest on the promise that good consequences come from good decision making. And so if we'll resist the devil, he's going to run away. If we draw near to God, he's going to draw near to us. I was bullied on the playground. I know that'll come as a shock to all of you. I was a little nerdy. And I was bullied on the playground. I always wanted the biggest, baddest dude to be my friend and be standing next to me because it kept me out of trouble. Well, we've got the biggest, baddest dude drawing near to us if we'll simply draw near to him. None of us has got clean hands. And the only way we get clean hands is to be washed in the blood of Christ. And the only way we maintain clean hands is to walk in the light as he is in the light. Because it tells us there in 1 John, if we'll do that, he will continually cleanse us from all sin. So these 9 do's and a don't are just good living decisions. Dan pointed out after class last week, we were talking about the parallels you can find between the Beatitudes in this passage. You can find exactly the same mindset described in the Sermon on the Mount. If we will plug into that worldview, we get benefits here and we are exalted in the after. If we're doing all these things, the last one will take care of itself. The don't will take care of itself. If you're doing all the do's, don't speak evil against one another. Everybody's got an opinion, right? And on mornings when the cat woke you up early and the computer died before you saved your changes and you forgot your slides when you got to the church building, on mornings like that, those opinions are rarely positive, right? We allow our circumstances to create in us troubled worldviews. Did you hear me? We allow them to. And it's that Frankel gap I talk about all the time. What do you put in the gap between stimulus and response? Are you going to count? Whatever it is you use to spread that gap a little wider so you can insert some love in it is a really important decision. Probably the most important decisions that we make are our response to our circumstances. Because if we'll respond positively to circumstances, it will shock everybody around us. Because this culture does not respond well to any negative circumstance. So, don't speak evil of one another. And he goes on then to say, the one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. So let's dissect these next couple of verses. Did you do that or did I, Thomas? Okay, all right, so it's working, it's just slow. The one who speaks against his brother speaks against the law. The one who judges his brother judges the law. And if you do those things, you're not a doer of the law, but a judger. Okay, there's a fine line drawn here. What law are we talking about? I mean, the law, the law, the law, the law, the law. What law are we talking about here? It's just the participation part. The what? Okay. The law of sin and death. Is it the law with a capital L? Are we talking about Moses here? Who's he writing to? He's writing to the Jews in the diaspora. It would be easy to get confused that this is Mosaic law here. And metaphorically, you can get there. But this is not, that's not what he's talking about. He is talking about nomos pistios here. He's talking about the law of faith. He's talking about that which saves you. Again, Justin's lesson this morning. If you understand where you sit before and after being added to the church, and after being added to the church without clean hands, which is everybody in here, you fit in one of those categories. Everybody in here. If we recognize that speaking ill of my brother or judging my brother harshly in some way, and that's the Greek here, krino, if we're doing that, we can't possibly be a doer of the law. Because nomos pistios means to love your brother. The natural outgrowth, this is the cool thing, the natural outgrowth of the recognition of salvation should generate positive interaction. And if we don't fully comprehend the extent to which we needed the Savior and the gargantuan effort that he went through to save us, if we don't adequately comprehend that, we might get lost in, I really don't like you very much. We don't get that option. Now, like love, Tanya and I are fond of saying, and they'll probably see this on the video, that sometimes we really don't like our kids. Those of you with kids understand exactly what I'm saying. We love them dearly. We love them so bad it hurts. But sometimes they're not very likable. If you corner Tanya after class this morning and you ask her about me, I think she'll tell you that she loves me. I think so. But she's going to tell you there have been lots of times she didn't like me very much. And I confess I earned it almost every time. Oh, every time. Yeah, I got it. Whew, that look, I got chills. They're multiplying. If we understand where we are and from whence we came, we can't help but have positive come out of us. And to the extent that positive is not coming out of us on a morning when your slides didn't save, it's because we don't recognize where we fit. We don't recognize what has gotten us from where we were to where we are. And a failure to fully recognize that is judging the law, is attacking our brothers, is judging our brothers. And so when the last sentence here, well, next to last sentence, let's get this because it's important. There's only one lawgiver, and the law we're talking about is not the Mosaic law. There's only one lawgiver, and that is now God through Christ. And there is only one law, and that's love. And we managed to mess it up. Of course, I remember the garden, don't eat of that tree. One rule. We blew it. One rule. Love. And we ought to respect it because from whence it comes. We ought to respect it because the author of that law has the ability to save or to destroy. And this says able to save and destroy. Some translations here, and I like those better, say he who has the power to save and destroy, the dunamos, dynamite, the power to save and destroy. And then who are you to judge your neighbor? Now, it's one of those proof texts that's used against us, right? This is one of those texts where when you're suggesting to someone that they're making poor decisions, you get this quoted at you. And I would suggest to you that we have to be really careful where we create the opportunity for someone to use this against us, because we do. We create those opportunities. Again, the word judge here, krino, has a connotation of harshness. Are we overly judgmental? And can you really take judgmental and qualify it like that? What is your motivation? Is so critical in that conversation. And we get credit for being judgmental for wrong motivations and wrong reasons. If we're fulfilling the law, what's the one word law? What's the law? Love. If we're fulfilling the law, and our approach to that person who may be making bad decisions is out of love, and we're providing dignity and respect in the context of the conversation, that's one thing. But if our purpose in making the observation is to show how good we are, if the focus is on me, and that's the motivation, you're on thin ice. Then you're pretty close to judging the law at that point. So, how do we make that approach without crossing this line? And the answer is what I just described. You do it in love, and you provide dignity and respect in the process. And sometimes you're not the one that can do it. Sometimes there's somebody better or uniquely suited to have that conversation. Yeah, Bob?
Jesus said, I didn't come to condemn, I came to save.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much sums that up.
Yes. I mean, if our purpose in life post-baptism is to channel Christ, and we recognize that for what it is, we recognize that mission for its importance and its magnitude, this takes care of itself. You know, I've said before that our role is to pick up the pieces after the consequences have come. If there are bad decisions being made, bad consequences are going to follow. That gives me an opportunity to have a conversation about how bad consequences follow bad decisions, and to offer the idea that good consequences may follow good decisions. Because the cool thing about this is once you make that first good decision, you get that first consequence. Hey, wow. And it becomes easier to build good decision making once you're feeling the good consequences. Sometimes that's delayed, though. And so we're baptizing a ton of ladies out at the prison, some of the guys out at the prison. They're not getting an immediate release. Sometimes that freedom comes much later. But if we're teaching them to look at what's going on in here as that good decision making starts, and see the change that you get in your present circumstance, even though it's not the best, but the change in your approach to your present circumstance yields good results. And so it is that response to circumstances that will be a positive feedback loop instead of a negative feedback loop. And that's what we're promised. So a little bit of a trap here, because it's easy to fall into that self-righteous mentality. It's easy for, as I said last week, those of us who won the location lottery where we were born and who experienced some success, and we're going to walk right into that in chapter 5, for us to think that the success is our fault. Have you ever noticed that when something bad happens, it's somebody else's fault? But when good things happen, my fault, right? We're willing to accept the success as somehow personally generated, but we don't want to accept the failure as somehow personally generated. And the fact is, they both come from the same source. And it's not me. And it's not you. They come from the same source. He holds us accountable for the bad decisions we make by creating bad consequences for us. Creating is a strong word. Allowing bad consequences for us. Some of us are hard-headed and don't learn quickly. Had to put our hand on the stove twice or 3 times to figure it out. Some of us think we're exceptional. And so while we can observe instance after instance after instance after instance of the application of the rule, we think we can do that without that consequence. Good luck to you. Don't fall into the trap. We're all in this mess together. And it's a mess. And we all have the same way out of it. And that's Jesus. So we go from don't be attacking your brother to what feels like what we'd call in a trial a sidebar. We go into this paragraph of who do you think you are? He says, come now you who say today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. How many planners do I have? Right? How many of you had the Franklin planner? You did the to-do list, you checked stuff off, you sat down and spent 3 days figuring out what your life goals were, and you wrote them out on a piece of paper. You know, there are some of us that are that nerdy. I used to think it was all until it worked. So it really is good to have some written goals and write down some plans on how to get there. And who's laughing when that happens? You know, I came to understand that you can plan, and you should plan. It's prudent to plan, but it better be with a number 2 pencil with a big eraser, because chances are, I can tell you the last 15 years didn't go as planned, did it? So, plan and pencil. He gets pretty pointed. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we'll live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in arrogance. All such boasting is evil. He does not leave any space here. All such boasting is evil. And it's because you boast in arrogance. Well, what's the arrogance here?
Didn't include God in the plan.
My plan about what I'm going to do and how it's going to come out. My plan. How arrogant is it? I mean, the language here is like shaking your fist, right? How arrogant is it to say, I'm going to do these things without recognizing that the diagnosis can come this afternoon? My dad retired and had the nest egg. And then 2008 happened. And a chunk of the nest egg was gone. Right? Tanya and I are starting to talk about the idea of me retiring. Sorry, Chris, don't panic. It's at least not until next July. We're starting to talk about what that looks like, what that takes. We've been obviously working on the plan for a long, long time. Yesterday was my 36th anniversary of signing the roll of attorneys. I got sworn into the bar 36 years ago yesterday. It's incredible. The plan, there was never a plan to go to law school. The plan was a dream that washed out when I took calculus. It happens to many. The plan then was, who knows? It just kind of happened. And we've been planning a long time about what happens when I'm too tired to get up. And I'm close, especially when the cat wakes me up at 5. If you think you can plan that way and have a reasonable expectation of it happening the way you have it planned, you better have him involved in the planning. Because this is one way he will get your attention. And he's gotten all of us some way, somehow. Market falls, bad diagnoses. You send a child out into the world and they make a hard left turn and you can't find them. Those things happen, right? If you boast about your plan and it does not include God, you boast in arrogance, and all such planning is evil. We need to recognize where we fit. And one of the themes that you've heard all the way through these four chapters and will play out in chapter 5, one of those themes is you're not in charge. And that's, for control freaks like me, that is frustrating. And my mom used to say, you got to learn to roll with the punches. And sometimes the punch hurts. But you got to roll, and you got to get up, and you got to keep going. And the strength and the courage to get up and keep going doesn't have to be yours. It can be his. For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose. Romans. Love that passage. It's Philippians. Philippians 2, isn't it? I think it is. I'm thinking of work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Philippians 2? I've drawn a blank. Here it is, 5 a.m., not much late. So, if we will allow him, he will provide us the energy. He will provide us the courage. He will provide us the path, and he will help us stay on it. It's not about us. It's about him. And the backside of that, and this is what we'll get into in chapter 5, which is going to have to happen next week, and we're going to have to do all of chapter 5 next week, which will be fun. On the success side of things, acknowledging that he is the reason breeds more success. And that starts at, did you find it? 2:12, that's it. Small correct decisions in this mindset, stacked on top of one another over time, compound into a blessed life. And if we'll recognize that it is His strength, His courage, His power that we can share in, then these decisions become much easier. They become much easier. But we want to do it ourselves. And so watch out, because when we think of the term, when he says here, you boast in your arrogance, we think of the term boasting as saying something, doing something to show somebody. And we think of arrogance as something that's plainly ugly on its face. And it's more subtle than that. If my lifestyle indicates a disregard for or simply an ignorance or an intentional ignorance of God, I am boasting in arrogance. And our culture teaches us that's what we should do. Because we all have to make it on our own. Well, we've got to make our own way. I got mine. Whatever happens to you, that's on you. And that is the converse. What we're called to is supremely counterculture. It is to bear one another's burdens. It is to love one another. And the world knows that we're different when they see us love one another, when they see us serve one another, when they see us do selfless acts. That's when we look different. And it is in that looking different, Justin's lesson this morning, that it becomes apparent that something's going on with us that doesn't go on in the world. Quit. Something's going on with us that's different than what's going on in the world. And if we are, you're going to conform yourself to the world, or you're going to conform yourself to Christ. I'd love to tell you that you can put a foot on both sides of that fence, but you can't. And all of us knows when you got a foot on the ladder on one side of the fence and a foot on the ladder on the other side of the fence, and when the ladder gives way, it's an ugly scene. But that's an ugly scene, trying to put a foot in both worlds. And I'm not preaching at you. I'm looking in the mirror. Because that's what we have an inherent tendency to do. I'll be a Christian when I'm over there at the church building, when all my brothers and sisters are watching me. I'll be a Christian when I'm at Walmart and I run into somebody from the church. But can you see Christ in me when nobody's watching? The old definition of integrity. Are you doing the right thing all the time, regardless of your audience or whether you even have one? Because that's where we need to self-evaluate. If we think we are self-sufficient, we are giving away the power that keeps us from being in that world. Many of us, by world standards, are rich. Some of us are rich by our standards. But if you compare us, take 350 million people here and compare us to 350 million people in rural China or rural India. Compare us to 350 million people in rural Africa. Tell me if we're rich. Beyond comprehension to those who don't have. And so he starts chapter 5 with a warning. weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. And we'll pick up there next week.